Hello, everybody. I guess we can start, right? Okay, so let me try to introduce our guests. Here with us today is three amazing guys from Spring team. Here is with us Brian Clausel, long-time Spring team member, working on Spring Framework, Spring Boot, and leading Spring for GraphQL. Brian, can you say to us what are the projects you're currently working on right now? I think it's related to Kotlin.
So right now I'm working on Spring Framework, Spring Boot, on the web part specifically. And I'm also the lead of the Spring for GraphQL project, where we're basically web and data meets in an interesting project, other RPC technologies.
Okay, and here with us, Mark Poloch. Mark is a Spring Data project lead. We have a lot of questions to you. And can you say what are you working right now?
Hey, sure. I'm Mark. I'm leading the Spring Data portfolio, meaning I'm overseeing all the projects that are within Spring Data, like Spring Data JPA, MongoDB, Redis. I've been the former spec lead of the reactive relational database connectivity project and former maintainer of the Lettuce Redis driver. And so deeply rooted in reactive technologies, in data, and on one of my side projects is also Spring Vault, where you can store secrets.
Okay, and Stéphane Nicoll, the core Spring Framework and Spring Boot contributor, the legend and the person behind the Spring Initializer, if I understand correctly, right, Stéphane?
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, former lead for start of Spring.io and Spring Initializer indeed. Working mostly these days on Spring Boot and tooling around the website, also Spring Web Services, and yeah, coordination between teams. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, and here with us, I'm host the meeting today. My name is Evgeny Borisov, but you can call me Zheka. And I'm I think I'm one of the biggest fans of Spring Framework. So a couple of words about myself. My name is Zheka, and I'm a Java developer. You know, it doesn't sound good today, but to justify myself, I can say that I'm Java developer exactly 25 years. And almost 20 years, I was using Spring since I'm Java developer. So yes, guys, I started using Spring in version number 2. It was even before add component annotation, and no matter, still this is the most beautiful thing I saw in my life. I think it's even more beautiful than Lord of the Rings. I mean the movie, not the book, but still it was the perfect framework. And today we're gonna talk about what's new in Spring Boot 4 and Spring 7. And my first question to you guys, what would you say, what should I say to my children in order to make them stop playing Roblox and start moving things to Spring Boot 4? What are the main reasons to do that?
I think, let me start. The most convincing thing is, look, if you grow up, then this GitHub project and this backlog is going to be yours. And you better put your application on a good foundation. But honestly, Spring is all about developer productivity. We are all Java developers, as you are. And everybody of us has written Java code, not only business code, but also infrastructure code. And a lot of things repeat across projects. And Spring is had that idea to simplify things. Started back then when Jakarta EE was J2EE to simplify EJBs. And from there on, we grew and adopted towards the demand of the evolving Java ecosystem. and started putting building blocks into places that make sense to support users to make them much more productive in writing their business applications.
Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, maybe each one of you can pick up some maybe non-official feature, but the one you love the best and the most, and you can tell us about this feature in the Spring 7 or Spring Boot 4.
Yeah, probably my favorite is the new modularity in Spring Boot 4. As we probably will have the opportunity to discuss later on. It was really meant as something for the team initially, moving auto configurations from one big module to technology-based module, where each module is basically containing everything related to a technology. We did that to make a more logical split between all the features that Spring Boot has to support. And it turns out that it's really popular and it resonates a lot with our community. So yeah, my favorite by far.
Okay, thank you, Stéphane. Brian?
Yeah, mine would be probably the new REST test client, because I think it was partially contributed by the community from the start, and we added to it and we refined it during the milestone phases. But I think that it shines a lot because recently I've been upgrading some of the guides that we have on Spring.io, and one of those guides is testing the web layer. So you can test it with a live server, you can test it with directly with the controller, or you can test it, the entire application with mocks. And previously, that guide had a bit of a testing specialized test REST template that Spring Boot contributed, and it had mock MVC. And now, when upgrading that guide, now you can reuse the exact same REST test client calls to test your web app, and only the setup changes. So it's really easy to do complete integration test or focused controller to get familiar with another API in the Spring framework or in the Spring portfolio. So now I think it's getting easier to test your applications, and you don't have to think a lot about which tool you should use to test your web app. It makes things simpler.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mark?
Yeah. There are so many great things in Spring Data.
You
I
can
think
say
if I had to pick one, it's probably ahead of time repositories. So this is an effort really that started back then with Spring Framework 6, when we decided to enable Graal native arrangements with Spring. And back then, we were really looking into how to remove a lot of reflective access in our Spring Data repositories. But for quite a while, that didn't go really anywhere. And the new generation now gave us the opportunity to revisit that topic. And ahead of time repositories came out as a design approach. And we love it pretty much because it moves the implementation of Spring Data repositories into the build phase and generates for you method bodies as if you have been writing them like 20 years ago. You look at it, it looks and feels like pure data access code, because that's really what it is. You have one single place that now shows you how the query looks like, how it is being executed. You can even debug into that. That's clearly not working for each and every case, because there is a lot of dynamic in Spring Data. But for the majority of queries, we can represent your repository pretty well with ahead-of-time technologies. But I have also to be sincere on that. Ahead-of-time processing was never really meant to pursue in those areas. So there will be probably the one or other revision to see where we can take really ahead of time processing into.
Okay, I think we need to talk a little bit more about that, but let's go back for several years. I always had feeling that Spring is trying to be compatible with everything. As I told you, I started with Spring 2.5, I think, even before Java configuration. And I remember the days when my grandmother always said that why we have such a lot of annotation which actually mean exactly the same. For example, Spring at least have something which we call different. It's auto-wire, but for why do we have 3 additional @inject? We have @inject of Java X and @inject of Jakarta and @inject of Google Juice. And I think Spring was the only framework which was supported everything, maybe except of Google Juice. But you can support a lot of technologies for a short period of time. You can support one technology for a long period of time, but you cannot support any technology for forever. And I felt that one day Spring a little bit switched, and you needed guys to decide what to support more, what to support less. So what is the criteria? How do you decide this? What should be supported in the next features, or what should be left? Because you cannot do everything. You know, we understand that we love you guys. So just explain, how do you decide this?
Right. So let me maybe start from the data side. When the JPA spec came out, then at least 3, and I think even 4 implementations were out there. Hibernate, TopLink, which eventually became Eclipse Link. Then there was OpenJPA, and there was one more. I don't really recall that name. And as with everything in life, initially all contributors were very eager to come up with the implementation, to adhere to the new specification version as things have progressed. But eventually, business reasons, hobby reasons, family started to kick in on the maintainer side. And so one or the other project became a little bit less maintained. And this effect is even more pronounced in, say, the last 10 years. OpenJPA didn't manage to catch up with more recent versions of the JPA specification. Eclipse Link is up to date, still a better version of the JPA 3.2 specification, and really only Hibernate is the one that is still maintained. And you can see similar effects across the entire ecosystem. QueryDSL, for instance, this is a huge project, but the time the core maintainers started having less and less time, maintenance went back. Maybe you even remember templating frameworks like Velocity, and for quite a while, Spring Framework had supported Velocity in addition to FreeMarker, TimeLeaf. But eventually, maintenance of Velocity also ceased, and that is the situation we have to cope with. And if we don't cut out dependencies that prevent us from progressing and bringing forward our framework, then we are stuck for like ever with a very old and outdated specification or a tool that sees an increase in security reports. The longer something is out there, the more security researchers are interested in exploring bugs. And that's just a tribute of time. And that's probably where you see a more pronounced way of us removing selectively things that just are not supported or prevent us from progressing. So that is my perspective and my take on that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got you. So do I understand correctly that one thing that everybody noticed in this generation, that how much you invest, guys, into AOT and Graal VM, right? It's not only my feeling, right? It's the reality.
So the Graal VM story, I think, was very pronounced with the Spring Framework 6.0 generation. So that was where the majority of effort was put in. And I think what you're perceiving now is the huge push with ahead of time repositories that we've built for Spring Data. But this isn't so much driven by Graal VM. This was much more driven by something that we started to explore. And a lot of things take a couple of approaches until you learn how to either get it right or how you're convinced to fully abandon it. And AOT repositories never felt like that they are not going anywhere, but rather we just haven't found the right angle to provide ahead of time functionality for AOT repositories. And beginning of the year, we finally had a version that has worked. We had the right approach to implement repositories ahead of time. Not only for JPA, but for a variety of store modules, for instance, Spring Data, JDBC, Cassandra, MongoDB. And that was what convinced us to move ahead with that theme. And the outcome is pretty impressive. You get on top of all the AOT optimizations you have right now, like an additional 10% in startup time improvement, a couple of percent of memory consumption, so less memory consumption, and you're moving all those repetitive things that are happening during startup time into the build time, and that makes applications just much more efficient. And so that is what we see as a major driver for that, with all the effects that you have also when you look into the generated source code. You can actually read it, you can actually debug it. And I consider myself ahead of time repositories still a very early iteration of what is really possible. We have just taken the idea of AOT processing to a level that it wasn't initially intended for bringing there. And this brings all sorts of consequences. On the one hand, the cool consequences where you have finally readable artifacts. You no longer have to debug proxies. And on the other hand, that there is appetite for more, that we see what isn't working as smoothly as expected. And now we have the challenge. Maybe some people hate us for that. Well, our team in specifically, that we create more trouble regarding that. So Stefan is already laughing. But yeah, that is kind of evolution. We explore things, we poke at things, we learn from that, and then we can make an educated decision on what is going to be then the next step. So that is really how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
Just back to the first question that you had. I think that when I started in the team, we were really like the entire industry was somewhat on the same release cycle with the long life cycles for Java itself, and also Java IE kind of setting a rhythm in the entire industry. And things changed quite a bit in a few years between like the specs being not just Jakarta, but there are multiple specs out there that you have to look at and pay attention to. Same for Java, which switched to a different release cycle. We know it all now. And so for each release, you have interesting features, runtime features or language features, and it's not just about adopting them when they're out. You have a chance to try them as preview features, and it's important for the entire community to have a look and give some feedback. And in parallel, we had quite a few large incidents, including in the Java ecosystem with big security issues in the industry. And that gave a very different perspective on how you manage release lifecycle? How do you upgrade? How do you pay attention to CVEs? And all that mixed, I think it's a different, we still have the same perspective releases or major releases, but the situation, the environment is a bit more complex. So when we're thinking about a new major release, it's not as obvious as before. Before that, it was like, yeah, we'll have a major release that year because that's what the industry was saying. And now it's a bit of a feedback loop. When in Spring Framework 6 we had a new baseline for Java 17, we felt like it was the right time. And in the industry, in the Java ecosystem, we felt that it was our turn to make that move to help the rest of the industry do the same. So some libraries and projects already upgraded, but we felt at the time that it was the time for us to do that. And for every major, there are pros and cons about which technology we should support and how long we intend to support them, because we want to give open source and commercial support for predictable amount of times. We're displaying those on our website. So whenever we're starting a minor or a major release, we have to think about a lot of technologies and how we mean to support them in the long run, but also how we think those, to which extent we think that new applications should also be looking at them. So are trying to phase out some technologies because we see them phasing out naturally in the industry, and it takes various forms. Sometimes we just downplay them a bit. Sometimes we just deprecate things because the maintenance costs is too high, or we think that the libraries themselves are not really as maintained as they were in the past. So that puts us in a situation where if we don't send any signal to Spring developers, it's a bad thing, because we want to tell them, yeah, you should have another look at this if you're betting a lot on this technology, on this particular technology, because it might go away or you might be in trouble in the future. So we feel that it's our responsibility as well to support as much as we can, but also to push people in the right direction so that they are not blindsided if something happens.
Mm-hmm. By the way, how do you decide what is major and what is minor changes for release?
Do you want to take that, Stéphane?
Yeah. So our cycle is very well defined, and feature releases, which is the middle number, that's where we add incremental new features and essentially trying to improve what the initial major did. So there's always a number of themes. So 7.0 had a number of themes, and 7.1, 7.2, the goal is to refine that and collect the feedback from the community, improve what we have, and potentially also add things that we wanted to add and didn't have a chance to do so. Majors, they rise when we have collected a number of things that we want to do, usually cross-portfolio, and that requires architecture change. So we do a major when we know that we will introduce something that will require more work to upgrade, potentially breaking APIs that we can't really do in a feature release. So for 6.0, 5.0, for instance, was the reactive stack. It was a very big change, bringing like a complete reactive stack. The data team also worked on that train to bring reactive repositories to Spring Data. 6 was really about GraalVM, so that's the AOT engine and the rest of it. 7 is around JSpecify, Jackson 3, the modularity in Spring Boot, and I guess what's trigger a new major is we have found a number of, at least two teams that are cross-portfolio, and sometimes that's also related to a requirement of raising the baseline. So raising the baseline for Java usually is what triggers a new major.
Mm-hmm. Okay. By the way, guys, from the one hand, you said that it's very hard to support everything, and I do understand. From the other hand, I see that a lot of Spring guys help to other open source projects which are not under the Spring hood. For example, you mentioned the Jackson migration, or for example, I see a lot in the MCP SDK, a lot of names of Spring guys there. So how do you decide in which additional project to participate?
So for Jackson, it all started with the fact that we have a close relationship with other team in the open source community, and Tattoo was working on Jackson, shared with the community at large that he was thinking about doing a new major. So on our team, Sébastien Deleuze is really the person who's been working with him a lot, exchanging ideas and then challenging him when he wanted to change some defaults, and then trying that out on the Spring side in snapshots, gathering feedback from our team to him, from him to our team. So essentially working a lot. And the reason we've done this is because Jackson, as you know, is really a very important library. And the changes that were scheduled for this new major could be potentially troublesome. And we knew that Jackson 2 wouldn't be supported for a long time after 3 is out. So our goal was really to make sure to offer as smooth transition as possible, and that requires to work with other projects before they actually release it. As for MCP, I don't have any insight, so I can't really say why we're working on it, but it's related to Spring AI booming at the moment.
Yeah, I understand. Everything which is popular and important to us. Guys, regarding the migration, I don't know what is your opinion, but in my opinion, there is 3 different dimensions in migration. So the first one is I call it DevOps dimension, when we need to upgrade the versions and we have the problem with version compatibility and we need to fix our POMs. Okay, so this is a kind of DevOps migration. Another one is technical migration, when we need to rewrite the code because a lot of libraries changes and we have import which are not exist, so we need to touch the code. And the most complicated dimension, in my opinion, in when some paradigma is going to change. For example, for me, the most the biggest change in the migration of Spring was when we switched to Spring 2.5 and Spring 3. And it was a totally new concept because it was kind of declarative way of configuring things, configuring beans. But since we have add configuration, we have imperative way of declarative configuration. So it's kind of new paradigm. So in your opinion, what, or maybe it will be in the future, what was the most complicated migration? In what version, which included most of all of these 3 dimensions?
One obvious one to me would be the Jakarta move, not because it was complicated by itself, because I remember at the time when things were discussed in forums and whatnot about the Jakarta, people were like, yeah, this is just a bash script, or I'll do that and so on. So the in that case, I guess it's probably the DevOps part that was the hardest, because you have to deal with a lot of human factors where you have like this small library that hasn't been maintained much, and somehow you have to get a new release of it and you have to track down people. Is it maintained anymore? Same thing for internal libraries. You had to synchronize with a lot of people. calculate and like schedule some kind of big bang in your company or some gradual approach. That was, I guess, the hardest part. The technical part, it was the same API. It was nothing changed much. Like the servlet containers, they maintained for a very long time. They maintained versions in parallel that had the exact same behavior, runtime behavior, and they were just like relocating the classes for the different branches. So definitely not runtime, but it was. I think it was a big one for our industry because it was also the opportunity for a lot of integrations and libraries where you realized, oh, that one hasn't moved for a long time. Maybe it's not that vibrant anymore, or there's not enough demand for new Jakarta-based versions for this. So I guess for a lot of where suddenly they needed more volunteers to take care of one project because the previous maintainers they may have moved on, something like that. So I think to me that was the simplest technical upgrade, but one of the most complex migrations when it comes to organizations and DevOps.
Okay. Okay, so now let's maybe talk about additional small, maybe not only changes in the last versions. For example, Spring Retry. Especially for me, I love this model. I think the most because when I'm writing the code which is not working, Spring Retry maybe can be a solution. No, without fixing something, you just can put that retry with 100 times. Maybe someday it will work. So now I heard that this model will not be supported anymore because it now becomes a part of Spring Core. So what was the reason? And do you move everything, or maybe part of the stuff will be not supported since this migration?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So Spring Retry has been an orphan project for quite a while with no really maintainer. We didn't really have the bandwidth to make progress on it, and at the same time, there was no real new features or major new features to be made. Historically, I actually don't remember how it started, but Spring Retry is being used, or used to be used rather, by Spring Batch, Spring Kafka, Spring MQP, and Spring Integration, and probably more Spring Cloud. Obviously, Spring AI is also using it. And each project, they had a really very specific scenario in terms of retry, why they want to retry, how they want to retry, and how they could integrate with the related technology. So for instance, for Kafka, retry is not really happening in Spring Retry itself because they need to compute the retry period upfront and ask the partition to do the retry for us. So they were mainly using Spring Retry as a way to compute the retry period. So each project has really its own thing, and it's really own path in the code base. So in a way, Spring Retry was not as generalized as we would have liked. So because it was like in a situation where no improvement could be made due to bandwidth, we've decided to move it to framework, but not really move it to framework ISO for the reason I've mentioned. Really revisit the API, look how we could modernize it, because anyway, it would be a breaking change. Try to simplify the API so that we really focus on the core feature, and then let the detail that used to be baked in the library move those details to the project. And so we've worked with the projects I've mentioned to integrate the new API. And I think the new API in Spring Framework is pretty cool. It's very, very, very simple compared to Spring Retry in the sense of it's really focused on one thing only. And as such, you will not find everything that Spring Retry used to do. So you might be a bit disappointed by that. And there's probably no intention in the framework team to move those features back to framework, because then we would replicate the problem that we had in Spring Retry. But that said, we got some feedback recently from the community, well-known community members, that we actually didn't move enough and something we're missing. So we've been working on that recently, and there's improvements in that area coming up in the next release already.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually, I thought maybe the reason you moving into core because the people not familiar with most of the features of Spring Retry. So I wanted to ask you how we, as a JetBrains, can help you to highlight the Spring Retry features for our users. Maybe you have any ideas.
Yeah. So I guess one thing that would be interesting, as always, with the IDE is when you do something, have some kind of validation that it's going to work. So if you put, for instance, retriable on an object that's not a bean, we all know it's not going to be processed, but newcomers, they might be confused why they've put the annotation and it doesn't do anything. That's one. Two, as usual, you'll find an enable method. So it's enable resilient methods in this case for the new API that triggers the processing of looking at bean methods and creating the aspect. If you haven't done so, then the annotation doesn't do anything. So something when you run the app that validates the retry aspect has been applied would be very cool.
Or if you call the method and you don't call it through the proxy, you're laughing because I made that mistake and I was trying to test something, and I think if I had €1 every time I fell into that trap without knowing it, I would be filthy rich at this point. And so yeah, maybe checking that if you're calling a method from within that class, so you're not going through the proxy, you won't have the effect you're encountering. That you're counting on. So it's not just retry; it's for everything. But it's easy. Retry feature here because you have the problem. You don't always think where this is called, like where is that method called from. So especially when you add it after the fact, it's easy to not think about this and don't have so to fall into that trap. That would be a nice hint.
And there's also the Spring Debugger initiative, where I think there might be super cool features, like if you're processing a request and you go through such a method and something fails and the framework actually did retry, the fact that you could see that somehow when debugging the method would be awesome.
Okay, if we'll go back to the migration recommendation, do you have any proper migration guides beyond the GitHub notes? Or maybe will some be official open write receipts or some other recommendation from you?
So every major we do comes with a migration guide. So there's really 3 levels when we do a major. One for each, absolutely every versions, we have the changelog, which lists what we've changed. For feature releases in major, we have release notes, which is what's on the wiki. I guess that's what you're referring to. And for majors, we have migration guides also on the wiki. And that's more of a cookbook, if you will, like trying to put keywords of things that needs your attention. So if you're using a certain technology, or if you're stuck with a certain concept, then you can go in the migration guide and search for the concept, and hopefully you'll have a section explaining what you need to do. As for open rewrite recipes, the Spring team don't do those in open source, so we don't have any initiative. There's a lot of things going on in the community some team members actually working on those, which is much appreciated. And as an enterprise customer, you also have access to additional recipes then.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and as I understand, most of your advice is not to skip the versions. For example, if I need to migrate from Spring 5, I need to migrate to Spring 6 first and then to 7. But I checked a little bit. We have a lot of clients which still use Spring Boot 1 or even Spring 4. So if they one day will decide to migrate to the latest versions, if it will be the same advice for them, still go, okay, Spring 4, Spring 5, then Spring 6, then Spring 7. Or maybe they can skip. Maybe from Spring 3, it will be a better idea to go to Spring 7, the one step. What do you think?
I mean, I can't personally really comment without looking at the actual application, but I think it kind of depends what the application uses. If the application uses Spring Framework and Spring Framework only, then it might be a little bit different because Spring Framework will have like bumps of requirements, whereas Spring Boot will have bumps of your entire ecosystem in terms of open source libraries. So you don't want it. It's not really going from Spring Boot 1 to Spring Boot 4, right? It's going from Spring Boot 1 and the entire ecosystem to Spring Boot 4 and an updated entire ecosystem. So you'll have to do the upgrade of everything at once, and that can be daunting. So the reason why we recommend doing one feature release at a time is because, as I've mentioned earlier, every feature release has has release notes, so you get a chance to basically bump a little bit everything. You also have like assistance in terms of configuration properties, telling you, hey, you've been using that config props, but actually IntelliJ IDEA is very good at that too, showing you that the property is no longer maintained or it's been deprecated, you need to rename it. That kind of things. But more importantly, you'll also upgrade to new versions of Jackson, Hibernate, you name it, and that can have an effect on your application. So I guess it's a gamble, I think. If you want to go to 1 to 4, that might work if you know very well your app and the perimeter and the things that it uses is limited. But for a bigger apps and a big team, it's much better to do it feature release by feature release, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about API versioning. I wanted to say why this version it's finally happened and what additional things you can tell us about that.
I don't remember exactly how it started. I think it was a mix of a new wave of questions around this and us thinking that it might be the time we do this. I think that we, at one point, several times we considered it, and every time we did, the consensus was that there is no consensus for API versioning. You can find as many people as opinions on that one. If you're a pure REST fan or if you're a bit more pragmatic, depending on what strategy you want to use. I think we finally realized that we don't have to, there is no one way to do this, and we don't have to pick a particular opinion, and that we could figure this out with several strategies. So some well-known configurable strategies, and also provide you can still implement whatever strategy you want. That was the starting point. So we looked at what APIs, well-known APIs, are doing, how people are implementing that in their own applications, how we could make that easier. And it was not, we had to approach it not just from the server side, but also from the client side. And even just starting with what is a version it's already, depending on who you ask, it's just an opaque string, but you're supposed to maybe compare them, or so it's it's very simple yet very deceptive, because it's more complicated than you think. But I think with this feature now, you can manage API versions for your REST API with a path segment, or with an HTTP header, or even with a query parameter, a mix of several, if you want, a custom strategy. And then it expands the at get mapping annotations and so on, so that you can add a new information. So not just the path, not just the produces and consume and headers. You can add this version, and this is a new signal of how to route incoming requests to the correct controller method. It is talk to many developers, and it's quite popular because we got a lot of feedback around, yeah, we are doing this manually in our application, and that will save us quite a bit of boilerplate and maintenance work that we don't want to really deal with. So I think that part is nice. But I'm sure that there are many areas where this is we might have missed things. So it's again, like we said earlier, Spring Framework 7 is the new major, and we started themes, and we'll refine those themes, and we'll build on top of them for the entire 7.x generation. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get new features, or if we expand that particular field in the next feature releases. But so far, yeah, we got very good feedback. And during the milestone phases, and even now, we didn't get like very harsh feedback, like you're doing it wrong, or I guess that people understood that if they can't find a way to apply their opinion, it works out. So I think we found the right balance by allowing everybody to have their own opinion and apply that to their APIs.
Oh, great.
Quick demo, Brian.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I have something prepared to show you. That's using the latest IntelliJ IDEA release, 2025.3, that got released recently. Brian, do you want to go through the demo, or shall I? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I can comment at the same time.
Okay.
So yeah, so we have a REST API where it's for a matchmaking application for an online game. So it's a demo application. So we are receiving requests from players that would like to participate to a game, and we're queuing them. So we're receiving those requests as JSON requests. And when queuing players, we are fetching information and then adding those players to a queue. But then that's our API surface for our official API. But if we need to add a new endpoint, like the queue stats, so to get the statistics about the queue, how many people there are in that queue, it's a new endpoint, and we want to have that in a separate version of our API, because we want to signal that to the consumers. So for that, there's a new version attribute that you can use in all the mapping annotations. And here we're saying that this is the 1.1 version. So this one appeared in the 1.1 version of our API. So that's one signal to say that this one is available as of 1.1. But of course, it doesn't tell what the other endpoints are doing. So here we're saying that our controller 1.0 plus API version. So all the other endpoints will have a version. We don't know which one. This one, it appeared as of 1.1 in our API. But we need a central way, because we still don't know what is the default version and how should the version be expressed by the client. And we need to have that in the web configuration where we can define all that in a central place. So we can say, we can use the request header. So we'll use here a custom request header for that version. We can say which versions are supported. So you need to list them, especially if those versions are not explicitly called out in your endpoints. You need to say those are the versions that I'm supporting. And you can also set which version is the default if no opinion has been provided by the client. And once we have that, here we can see we're at 1.1. Once we have that, we can try with the embedded HTTP request in the IDE.
So nice tip that I've actually discovered while preparing the demo is if you create a file and then you anywhere in your project and you put HTTP as a suffix, you get the HTTP editor, which is really neat if you need to share samples within your team. So that's the request that doesn't send a version, and because we've said that the default version is 1.1, that should work. So yeah, we indeed get a 200, an empty queue because we've just started the application and no players have been queued yet. In this case, so that language means specifying HTTP headers, and as you can see, I'm specifying 1.0, and so as a result, the framework will reject actually it will say I don't know about that API, that endpoint does not exist in that API. So it's quite cool, and good support from the IDE. They're telling you that you haven't configured versioning and giving you hints what next steps you need to do.
Okay, great, guys. I have an additional question regarding the different ways to declare beans. I was teaching Spring for years, and still it was very simple to explain when to use what kind of configuration. So, for example, I was saying something like, in case you need the feature to change the bean configuration without recompilation, you can use the XML format. In case you want to configure some complicated bean and it is not your class, use at Java config, at configuration, at bean. If it's your simple class, just use at component and service, and that is all. And now in the last version, I see that we have some registrar for declaring beans, some programmatic way. Can you explain when this way should be used and what the advantages?
I'll start and maybe Mark can continue. I think it started, this entire thing started when we started working on AIoT in general with GualVM, because we needed more internal ways to register beans and register definitions. So we started reworking some of the APIs there. And also at the same time, there was, and there still is, a strong will in the community to work on startup times and to have less quote unquote magic. So have a more defined way of knowing what you'll get when your application starts and runs. So that also in part explain what the work we've been doing with Spring Boot modularization to make things more transparent to users, and you can more pick and choose what you want. And here, I think we're getting started in the sense that this is not yet a full programming model that we intend to expose to users, but they are just like AOT with data repositories. I think this is the start of something, and we don't know yet where it's going to go. And I think that when it's going to be, if and when it's going to be a new entire programming model, like we'll probably share more about it. But right now, it's most of it, I would say, is I would say it's a byproduct of what we needed. And we don't intend it to be front-facing and like top priority for our users. If you're interested, if it solves your problem, fine. But we'll probably dig into this more and more, and we'll see where it goes. I don't know, Mark, if because you've been using it, how do you feel about it?
Well, I've seen always from the perspective, what are you trying to solve, and which audience are you trying to please? And with a lot of things having their root in XML, you had to start somewhere, right? With the evolution towards annotation-driven declarations of beans, we opened up a much more embedded way to declare components and beans, also in very different ways. And Spring Boot really showed the power of add bean methods in a declarative way, with all the conditions, with all the things that you can really achieve. And there are many more ways to declare beans, as Brian mentioned, the new bean registrar that we are trying to explore. You can directly register beans on the context itself. You have the good old import bean registrar, which is heavily used by Spring Data, but it has also its own drawbacks. And the more we evolve our own programming model, the more we see where we actually want to go and what we do want to provide. And AOT has one of these interesting bits that all the bean definitions are directly rendered out into code. And so that a lot of configuration code can be immediately bypassed by just spinning up those bean definitions that are AOT defined. And this is all a journey. We will figure out what the best is. And for users, I think it makes a lot of sense to weigh in decisions and drawbacks. Do you want to have, do you prefer locality? Do you prefer reproducibility regarding introducing more flexibility? Or do you require rather static definitions? And based on that, you make your decision to pick the right tool for the right job. And that is the way how I see it.
I see.
Currently, one actually, I see this comment on lazy constants, and this is an interesting one. So I've been following that JEP for quite a while. We have also provided some feedback, and there have been a couple of revisions. I think since Spring Data 2.0, we introduced our own variant of lazy because there wasn't something like that. And now we are very pleased to see something like that emerging within the JDK itself and the standard libraries, so that we can eventually phase out our very own lazy, though it isn't really as powerful as the Java standard library variant. I'm not sure about the opinion in the Spring Framework core team about that, but for data, that is really something we are looking forward.
Okay. So, guys, I have a next interesting question regarding Project Loom. It's not me who thought about it, but I heard it a lot that maybe we can simplify the things like Project React, because now we can work different way. We have the virtual threads, and maybe all these performance issues will be solved in different ways, so we can go back to the imperative simple style of development. So do you think about the future of React?
Yeah, it's we're very pleased to see virtual threads. So we adopted virtual threads quite naturally in Spring Boot, where now you can turn on a flag, and we'll configure the virtual threads infrastructure for your web server, your clients, wherever it's supported, we'll do it. So that's already in. The next building block would be structured concurrency. So that would be a way to organize and do and have the equivalent of concurrent. So instead of relying on features, or in the case of reactive programming, instead of Flux or Mono, you can use structured concurrency. So that's the next building block, but it's just the first step, because there needs to be more. If you look at something like Project Reactor, in my opinion, there's the runtime aspect of how do you distribute work. That part is covered by virtual threads, I believe. There's the programming model. How do you organize concurrent programming? That would be, so in the case of Reactor, that would be all the operators that you have and that you can build together. So that structured concurrency, which is in preview right now, is the first building block. You'll need more to have a more comprehensive approach to all the problems that you need to solve when you do concurrent programming in general. And then there are other things like how do you communicate values along the way. So in Reactor, there's a context object that is communicated along the pipeline. And I believe for structured concurrency, there are scope values, which are also in preview right now. So that would be the equivalent. And the last bit that you would see also in Reactor is the way to manage cancellation when you're getting a stream of data, and how do you cancel them as a consumer. And in the first place, how do you stream data? And right now, those bits are not fully covered as far as I'm aware. But yeah, I structured concurrency, scope values, streaming support, and cancellation all working together. I think it's going to be really nice to have that. But it's a bit early to know how it will look like. But I think it's already, if you don't need the full power of reactive, you can already leverage quite a bit by using virtual threads and structured concurrency if you're brave enough to have that dash preview flag in your application. But it's definitely the right time to try it. If you're interested in that, if you would like to solve those problems in your apps, it's definitely now that you should try it out and give the feedback to the JEP owners.
Okay. So I think we're almost done. I have two more questions. One question from my side. I always wanted to ask that. Do you know that one of the most important classes you have in Spring Framework, they already are allowed to drink beer, even if they live in USA, because they are more than 21 years. And when I'm looking at these classes, I remember once I asked Jürgen Holler why these classes is written so strange. There is no single responsibility. Even the name of the class, something like common annotation beam post processor. It's not like the people supposed to write the code. And then he said, right, yes, we wrote this code in order that everybody will be able to write very clean code. But when we did that by ourselves, it was before all these books was written. So I'm just curious. Are these classes deserve to be rewritten someday, or it will be for forever like this? You know, it's kind of pills which are based off all the Spring Framework, but still they're written in the old-fashioned style.
Yeah, so maybe I can start on that. Maybe most users are familiar with JDBC template. Some might be familiar with REST template, some might be familiar with Mongo template, and that's really the API front-end model that Spring started evolving with, to abstract all the functionality behind those template APIs that you could simply subclass, customize to your gusto, and then use rather simple methods to consume all the functionality that you needed to consume from your component. Now, over time, JDBC template, REST template, and also Mongo template, they grew in their feature set. And at some point, we realized that we keep adding yet another overload, yet another method. And when you do command space in your IDE, then you end up with hundreds of suggestions. And we found that we probably have reached the limit of how far we can stretch those concepts. At some points, we started to look into alternative models. And we have started, for instance, in MongoDB to evolve concepts around fluent clients. And that has kept on and continued into a Spring Framework, where you have now JDBC template, where you have REST client, sorry, not JDBC template, JDBC client, the database client on the R2DBC side, web client for the reactive HTTP client, JMS client, all sorts of clients that now guide you through a concise, fluent API, accepting one thing at a time, instead of providing you with a ton of options where you have to pass in a lot of arguments, comma separated, and if you are not familiar with a particular method, you don't even know what these parameters mean. And that is the way we see evolution in terms of defining also programming models, learning from where we started. We have by now quite an okay impression of what we want to support. We know pretty well what didn't work with the previous model. And so that's how we move forward on those architectural patterns within certain APIs.
Okay, guys, and what should we wait in the future? Maybe you can tell personally to me what will not be supported in the future. I will not tell to anybody. I will keep it in the secret.
So it's one thing for the future. I can tell you next year is 2026. So that is about 2.5, 3 weeks away. We will ship and keep shipping service releases. So we are about to start the release train from the Spring side. There are already a couple of micrometer releases. Other than that, we are playing and exploring a lot of ideas. In Spring Data, we took it even so far that we broke the entire Spring ecosystem right before the GA release, after the very final release candidate. It was worth it. And we keep doing these things to evolve our framework, try out ideas, and see what else can we provide to our community that they are actually looking for. And we will see in the next feature releases how this plays out.
One bit that we'll also do is a few releases ago, we declared REST template as feature complete, and the community freaked out a bit because they thought that we would rip it out right away. But we just kept it around because it's not creating a lot of maintenance work for us, and we know it's popular. But for this major release, so Spring Framework 7, we found that quite a few features, including the API versioning feature, we couldn't integrate them properly in REST template without breaking things effectively. And REST client now, its successor, has been around and is being used by a lot of apps right now. So we thought that we reached a new point in the life of REST template, because now, while we could, before that, we could say, if you're starting something new, use REST client. If you're happy with REST template, then go ahead, it's fine. But now that we saw and that we implemented several features in REST client and we couldn't do those in REST template, we felt bad, because if we don't let people know, then they're not in a good position to push their application forward and support more things. So if they have API versioning on the client side. So that's why we have a soft deprecation right now in the documentation for REST template. And I saw earlier that someone pointed in a chat the Road to GA blog posts. So we announced on one of those blog posts what our plans are around REST clients in general in Spring, what we're doing and what we're expecting. And there we announced that we would deprecate it formally in the 7X generation and probably remove it before the next major version. So it still gives you plenty of time, but we wanted to give that warning as early as possible, because it's not like you're in danger if you're still using it. It's just that it's it becomes a liability for your application if you want to use new things at this point. And we're exploring several new features around REST clients. So API versioning is done, but we're also looking into more. So like maybe streaming support with non-reactive clients, more and more things. And we know for a fact that it's not possible to implement those in REST templates. So we're giving you that information now.
On the Spring Boot side of things, like the meetings to brainstorm about next features barely started, but two things that I'm already have on my mind is MQP 1.0 support in the next feature release of Spring Boot, hopefully. There's also some brainstorming about improving test utilities, especially related to SOJ, like letting you inject objects in your test that helps assertions. So stay tuned for that.
Okay. Okay, guys. So thank you so much for coming, for explaining all this. We love you guys, and thank you for making our life much better with your wonderful framework. Andrei Beliaev, do you have any questions from the audience?
Thanks for having us, and thanks for making my life easier, because I'm spending much of my time staring at the IDE, and and I like the new look. I don't like when people move my UI that much in web apps, but the new look I like very much, and I like how when you're making UI changes, you're making them gradually, so that I'm not in a state of shock when I'm upgrading the new version and I'm not completely lost. So yeah, I'm getting older and I don't like things changing much, but it's for the best. So I'm really happy with it these days.
Yeah, exactly that. Thank you, JetBrains. We love you too. Awesome tool. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having us. I enjoy every single day. Working also with IntelliJ. I've been, maybe I should not say that, but still, I've been a long-term Eclipse user, and at some point, just IntelliJ caught me, and yeah, that's how it is.
Nice.
All right, then that's the end, I guess.
Yeah. Somebody should come and shut down.